A Jewish rabbi dies on the night of his ordination, but instead of honor, he falls into a terrifying abyss. Chained souls cry out in agony, and one voice pierces the darkness, screaming the name he never expected: Jesus. What happens next will shake your faith, your tradition, and your view of eternity.
My name is Eliyahu ben David. I am 44 years old, born and raised in the ancient city of Jerusalem. Some people call this place the heartbeat of the world, the crossroads of faith and prophecy. For me, it was more than history. It was home, though one built on centuries of tradition, expectation, and the weight of my father's name. My father, Rabbi Shlomo ben David, was a man revered by scholars and feared by skeptics. His voice carried authority, his teachings filled synagogues, and his opinions shaped the lives of many. To our community, he was a pillar of truth. To me, he was both my greatest inspiration and my greatest burden. From childhood, I longed for his approval. Every time I traced the sacred letters of Torah, every time I recited prayers at dawn, I did so with one eye on heaven and one eye on him. In our home, religion was not simply practiced, it was enforced. Sunrise began with prayer, midday was filled with study, and evenings echoed with discussions of Talmud and Halakha. My father's library was lined with volumes older than some nations. I can still smell the leathered bindings and the faint dust of parchment when I close my eyes. It was beautiful, yet heavy. I grew up with the sense that God was everywhere, yet always out of reach. As I grew older, I followed the expected path. While other boys played in the streets, I memorized verses. While others dreamed of travel or trade, I dreamed only of mastering the Torah. By the time I was 20, people in our synagogue whispered that I would one day inherit my father's mantle. But whispers do not fill the emptiness of a soul. You see, I knew the words, but I did not know the word. I recited prayers, but they often felt like they bounced off the ceiling, hollow echoes, rather than living conversation. I studied the law with my mind, but my heart was untouched. Yet outwardly I carried myself with pride. Pride was easier than confession. Pride was safer than admitting that deep inside I felt lost. When my father died, it was as though the ground shifted beneath me. I remember standing at his grave, the air thick with grief and incense, and feeling a strange mix of sorrow and fear. The mantle of expectation fell fully upon me. His disciples looked at me as though I were already his successor. My family pressed me to continue the legacy, and I made a vow, one I thought was noble at the time, that I would dedicate my life to the Torah and never let his name be forgotten. I pushed aside my doubts and threw myself deeper into study, discipline, and ritual. Within a few short years, I was being prepared for ordination. It was the greatest honor of my life, or so I thought. I believed I was walking toward my destiny, but in truth, I was walking straight toward my death. The weeks leading up to my ordination were a blur of preparation. My teachers pressed me to sharpen my arguments, to memorize passages, and to carry myself with the authority of one who would soon be called Rabbi. Outwardly, I felt pride as neighbors whispered my name with respect. Inwardly, I carried a quiet storm. Every night when I closed my eyes, I felt the weight of emptiness pressing down on me. Still, I convinced myself that once I became ordained, the void would vanish. Surely, I thought, stepping into my father's shoes would give me the peace I longed for. After all, if knowledge of Torah, obedience to law, and respect of men could not fill me, What else could? The night before my ordination, I prepared as I had so many times before, washing my hands, laying out the white garments, reciting prayers until my throat was dry. The apartment was quiet, except for the faint rustling of pages as I studied the words of Moses and the prophets. I read them aloud, letting the syllables roll across my tongue, trying to convince myself that I belonged in the line of holy men who came before me. But then it came. At first it was only a faint pressure in my chest, as though a hand were pressing against my heart. I ignored it, telling myself I was tired. But the pressure grew, heavier, sharper, until it felt like fire spread through my ribs. I gasped for air. My hands trembled. The room spun, and the letters on the page blurred into dark rivers of ink. I stumbled toward the door, thinking perhaps I could call for help, but my legs gave way beneath me. The last thing I remember of that world was the sound of my own body striking the floor and the prayer half formed on my lips, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Then, silence. When I opened my eyes, I was no longer in my apartment. I was standing in a darkness unlike anything I had ever known. It was not the simple absence of light. This was a living darkness, a suffocating presence that seemed to breathe against my skin. I reached out my hands, but they vanished in the void before me. My breath echoed strangely, as though the air itself resisted entering my lungs. I began to hear sounds, at first distant, then growing louder. Whispers, like prayers distorted and twisted. Groans of men, screams of women, 1,000 voices overlapping, crying out in languages I did not recognize, yet all carrying the same tone of despair. The ground beneath me pulsed like it was alive. With every step I took, shadows clung to my feet like tar. I tried to recite the words of Torah, but my voice cracked. The verses I had mastered all my life poured from my lips like broken glass. Each syllable cut me instead of comforting me. I began to run, though I did not know where. The more I moved, the more the cries surrounded me. Faces emerged in the darkness, faces I recognized. Men who once taught me, elders from synagogues, rabbis whose names were revered in our city. Their eyes were hollow, their mouths twisted as they chanted prayers with no end, bound in chains that looked like scrolls unraveling endlessly around them. One of them called out to me, his voice hoarse and filled with agony, "Eliyahu, why are you here?" I froze. I had no answer. My pride, my certainty, my ordination, all of it meant nothing here. The chains rattled, and I realized with horror that the scrolls which once symbolized wisdom had become their prison. And then I saw him. Through the haze of torment, a figure slumped in chains of fire. His beard was white, his eyes hollow yet still piercing. My heart stopped. It was my father. Rabbi Shlomo ben David, the man I had admired, the man I had sworn to honor, now bound in this place of sorrow. He lifted his head with effort, and when his eyes met mine, I felt a grief deeper than death itself. My father's eyes locked onto mine, and for the first time in my life, I saw no pride in them, no authority, no trace of the rabbi who had commanded the respect of thousands. Instead, I saw regret. His lips trembled as he whispered, his voice raw and hollow, "Eliyahu, do not follow me here." The sound cut deeper than any blade. I wanted to deny it, to tell him this was not real, but everything around me pressed with an unbearable weight of truth. The darkness was no illusion. It was alive, and it clung to me like oil on my skin. I fell to my knees beside him. "Abba," I cried, "what is this place? Why are you here? You taught Torah your whole life. You were a righteous man. You led our people." He lowered his head, and his chains rattled like broken commandments. He said, "I knew the law, but I rejected the one who fulfilled it. I worshipped the traditions. I sought honor. I trusted in my knowledge, but I turned my back on the Messiah."
The words shook me to my core. My father, the man whose footsteps I had vowed to follow, was confessing that he had missed the very purpose of all his devotion. Tears burned in my eyes. "No, Abba, it cannot be. You told me the Messiah had not come." Slowly, with a pain that seemed to tear at his very soul, he looked at me again. "I was wrong, Eliyahu. Yeshua is the Messiah. I denied him, and now I am denied. I thought I was defending the faith, but I was resisting the truth." His voice rose, cracking with anguish. "Do not follow me here." I stumbled backward, my heart pounding so loud it drowned out the wails around me. I tried to cling to the verses I knew so well, but every word twisted as it left my lips, mocking me. I was naked before the reality that I was walking the same path as my father was. The shadows around us swirled and formed grotesque shapes, faces of rabbis I had studied under, their mouths forever reciting passages that gave no life. I saw scrolls unraveling like serpents, wrapping around them, squeezing tighter with each prayer they uttered. They were enslaved by the very words they once exalted. One rabbi, whose debates I had admired, lifted his eyes to me. His face was twisted in agony, yet he still mouthed the Shema. But here those sacred words sounded like curses, hollow and powerless. It struck me like lightning. Prayers without truth are prisons, not freedom. The air grew heavier, pressing against my chest. The cries of the damned became a chorus, rising into a deafening roar. I covered my ears, but the sound was not outside me. It was inside, shaking my very soul. I cried out, "God of Abraham, God of Isaac, God of Jacob, where are you?" But no answer came. Only the suffocating darkness and the faces of those who had put their faith in religion, but not in God Himself. I turned again to my father, desperate. "Abba, is there no hope for you?" His eyes filled with tears. "I chose pride over surrender. I chose law over grace. I chose the praise of men over the Son of God. My time is finished, but yours is not. Eliyahu, cry out while you can." Then the chains dragged him back into the shadows, and his cries faded into the endless chorus of despair. I was alone. The ground beneath me trembled, cracking open like a mouth ready to swallow me whole. Flames erupted in the distance, casting a sickly red glow that revealed countless more souls bound in torment. Each one was caught in a cycle, praying, chanting, teaching, yet never freed. The rituals they trusted had become cages. A horrifying realization struck me. I was next. I had lived for the law, for knowledge, for my father's approval, for the respect of men. I had memorized scrolls, debated doctrine, and prepared for ordination, but I did not know the God I claimed to serve. I was steps away from sharing their fate. Terror gripped me. I screamed into the abyss, my voice cracking, "Help me! Somebody help me!" But only echoes answered. I fell to the ground, broken. The pride that had carried me all my life shattered like glass. I had no defense, no righteousness, no strength left. And in that moment of absolute despair, I remembered my father's last words, "Cry out while you can." With what little breath I had, I whispered the name I had mocked, the name forbidden in my house, the name that echoed through centuries of prophecy and promise. Yeshua, Jesus, if you are the Messiah, help me. The moment his name left my lips, the darkness shuddered, the screams faltered, the ground stilled, and in the distance I saw it, light, a single point, brighter than the sun, breaking through the endless black. The abyss trembled as the light grew, chasing away the shadows. Figures fled into the void, shrieking in terror at what was coming. And then I knew I had called on the only name that could save. The light grew brighter until the abyss around me quaked like a storm-tossed sea. Shadows screamed as they fled, shriveling as though burned by its touch. For the first time since I collapsed, I felt air fill my lungs, pure, alive, unlike anything I had ever breathed. I shielded my eyes, but the light pierced through me, exposing every hidden thought. My sins paraded before me, not the sins of theft or murder, but the quieter chains: pride, hypocrisy, fear of men, the love of ritual more than love of God. They wrapped around me like invisible cords. I trembled, certain I was about to be crushed. Then, out of the radiance, a figure emerged. He was clothed in white brighter than lightning, yet his presence was not blinding, but healing. His eyes, oh, his eyes were like flames, yet filled with a depth of love I had never known. When he looked at me, I felt completely known and completely loved, all at once. I collapsed at his feet, unable to lift my head. Every verse I had studied, every prophecy I had memorized, seemed to converge in him. The words of Isaiah rang in my mind. The people walking in darkness have seen a great light, and now that light stood before me. With a voice that carried both authority and gentleness, he spoke my name, Eliyahu. The sound of it shook me to the core. No rabbi, no father, no teacher had ever spoken my name with such power and tenderness. It was as though he had known me before I was formed. I stammered, Who are you?" He looked into me, and his words cut through the last veil of my doubt. "I am Yeshua, the one your prophets wrote about. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." At his words, the chains around me snapped and fell to the ground with a sound like thunder. The darkness recoiled farther still, as though his very presence was torment to it. Tears flooded my eyes. I wanted to believe, yet I felt unworthy. "But I studied your word and missed you. I lived for the law, but not for you. I am guilty. Why would you come for me?" He reached out his hand, and as it touched my shoulder, waves of warmth and life surged through me. "Because I love you," he said, "I gave my life for you. The law was a shadow pointing to me. Your works could never save you. Only my blood can wash you clean. I have called you, and now I am sending you." His words sank deep into my soul. In that instant, I saw the scriptures with new eyes, from the Passover lamb to the suffering servant of Isaiah, from the Psalms of David to the promises of Jeremiah. Every line whispered his name. I wept uncontrollably. I had spent a lifetime chasing approval, yet here was the one who had loved me all along, who had waited patiently for me to cry out. The abyss shook violently, as though it could no longer hold me. The ground beneath me split open, but instead of falling, I felt myself being lifted, carried upward, away from the torment, away from the darkness, into a realm of peace. I looked once more at him, my voice trembling. "What must I do?" He said, "Follow me, not as a rabbi bound to the law, but as a son set free by grace. Testify of what you have seen, for your people are blind, as you were blind, but now you see. Go and tell them."
And with that, the light enveloped me completely. The light wrapped around me like a cloak, lifting me higher out of the pit. The cries of the abyss grew faint, fading like echoes of a nightmare. All that remained before me was Him, Yeshua, the Messiah, the Son of God. I could not stand. I knelt in awe, trembling, my tears falling like rain. Yet His presence was not crushing, but liberating. I felt as though centuries of striving, of pressure, of expectation had been stripped away in a single moment. He spoke again, and His words resounded not only in my ears, but in my very soul. "Eliyahu, all your life you have sought the approval of men, but I call you to seek the approval of God. You have studied the scriptures diligently, but you missed the heart of them. Every scroll, every prophecy, every law pointed to me." I dared to lift my eyes. His face shone with a brilliance that defied description, yet it was His eyes that undid me. They were pools of fire and tenderness, revealing every sin I had ever committed and every ounce of love He still had for me. "Rabbi," I whispered instinctively, though the title felt inadequate. "How could I have missed you? I read Isaiah, Jeremiah, Daniel, yet I was blind." He answered gently, "Because you searched with pride, not with humility. You looked for glory, not for God. The scriptures are fulfilled in me. Do you not remember the words of Isaiah? He was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows, acquainted with grief. He was pierced for our transgressions, crushed for our iniquities. By His stripes we are healed." As he spoke, the verses I had memorized all my life came alive. They were no longer ink on parchment. They were living, breathing truth. I saw the Lamb of Passover, its blood smeared on the doorposts of Israel, and realized it was His blood that spares us from judgment. I saw the bronze serpent lifted in the wilderness, and knew He had been lifted on the cross to heal us from the venom of sin. I saw the Son of Man in Daniel's vision, coming on the clouds, and I knew it was Him, reigning forever. I covered my face and sobbed. "It was all you, all this time. It was always you." He knelt beside me and lifted my chin with His hand. "And still I came for you, not because you were righteous, but because I love you. My Father sent me so that all who believe will not perish, but have everlasting life, even the son of a rabbi bound by tradition, even you." The weight of His love crushed my defenses. I collapsed into His embrace, and for the first time in my life, I felt whole. After what felt like eternity wrapped in His presence, He drew me back and spoke with authority. "Eliyahu, listen to me. I am sending you back. You cannot remain here, not yet. You have a testimony to bear."
I shook my head. "But they will not believe me. My family, my community, the rabbis, they will reject me as they rejected you." His gaze held mine firmly. "Yes, they will, but you are not called to win their approval. You are called to speak the truth. The seed will be planted, and in time it will bear fruit. Some will hate you, but some will hear and be saved." Fear wrestled within me. I don't know if I am strong enough." He smiled, and it was like sunrise breaking over the horizon. "My strength is made perfect in your weakness. You will not stand alone. I will be with you always, even to the end of the age." At that moment, he stretched out his hand, and I saw scars in his palms, marks that testified of the cross. They glowed with eternal power, and as he touched my forehead, fire coursed through me. Not fire that consumed, but fire that refined. I felt the chains of religion burn away, the weight of tradition lift, and the breath of new life surge within me. "Go," he commanded, "and tell them what you have seen. Speak not with the wisdom of men, but with the power of God. Many are blinded by pride, as you once were. Tell them that I am not far, but near. Tell them that the Messiah has come." I bowed low, my tears falling onto his feet. "I will go, Lord. I will testify." He stood, radiant, and the heavens seemed to part around him. Behind him I saw a glimpse of what words cannot capture, colors beyond imagination, a river of living water, multitudes clothed in white, worshipping with joy. My heart longed to remain, but his command burned within me. "Go." The light around him intensified, and his voice echoed one last time. "You are mine. Do not fear. Testify of me." Suddenly, I was falling, not into darkness, but back into my body. My chest heaved as though breath returned. My eyes snapped open, and I found myself lying on the floor of my apartment. The Torah scroll I had been studying lay beside me, open to the words of Isaiah. My tears soaked the pages. But I was not the same man who had fallen. I was no longer the rabbi's son chasing approval. I was no longer the prideful scholar seeking honor. I was a man reborn, claimed by the Messiah himself. When I awoke on the floor of my apartment, my body was drenched in sweat, my chest heaving as though I had been pulled from the depths of the sea. My hands shook violently, and tears still streamed down my face. For several minutes I could do nothing but weep for my father, weep for the rabbis I had seen in chains, weep for the years I had wasted chasing shadows when the light had been so near. Yet even in my grief, I felt something I had never known before. Peace. A peace so deep it surpassed every prayer I had ever spoken, every ritual I had ever performed. My heart was no longer striving. I was no longer an orphan trying to earn approval. I was a son, embraced by the Messiah himself. The morning of my ordination came. Friends, family, and scholars filled the synagogue, whispering with excitement. My father's disciples sat in the front rows, their eyes fixed on me. The scrolls had been prepared, the ceremonial robes laid out. I was meant to take my father's place. But I could not. As I stood before them, the words of Yeshua burned within me like fire. I opened my mouth, and instead of the expected blessings, I told them everything. I spoke of the darkness, the cries of the lost, and the rabbis bound in endless prayers that gave no life. I spoke of my father, our great Rabbi Shlomo ben David, confessing with tears that he had rejected the Messiah and was chained in torment. Gasps filled the room. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others clutched their garments as though pierced by blasphemy. But I could not stop. With tears running down my face, I declared the name I had once despised. Yeshua, Jesus of Nazareth, is the Messiah. He came to fulfill the Torah and the prophets. He is the Lamb who was slain, the light that pierces the darkness, the Son of God who died and rose again. The synagogue erupted. Some shouted in anger, others wept, still others stormed out. My own family looked at me with horror, as though I had betrayed our bloodline. One of the rabbis stood and pointed at me, his voice thundering, "Heretic! Blasphemer!" But I was not afraid. For the first time in my life, I was free from the fear of men. I looked at them all and said, "You may reject me as you rejected him, but I cannot deny what I have seen. I was dead, yet I live. I was blind, yet now I see. And I tell you the truth, there is no other name under heaven by which we must be saved, but the name of Yeshua." The ceremony was never completed. I left that synagogue not as Rabbi Eliyahu ben David, but as a man marked by the Messiah. My community turned its back on me. My family shunned me. Doors that had once been open were slammed shut. Yet I walked away with joy, for though I had lost everything, I had gained him. From that day on, I began to testify wherever I could. In quiet conversations with neighbors, in hushed tones to those who would listen, I shared my story. The pit of darkness, my Father's confession, and the glorious light of Yeshua who saved me. Some spat in my face, some wept and turned away, but a few, just a few, listened, and their eyes filled with the same light that had rescued me. I am no longer the man I was. My identity is not in a title, nor in the approval of men, nor even in the legacy of my Father. My identity is in Yeshua, my Messiah, my Savior, my Lord. And so I tell you now, as I told them then, do not wait. Do not cling to religion, to ritual, to tradition, thinking it will save you. None of these can break the chains of sin. Only Jesus can. I saw with my own eyes the fate of those who rejected him. I heard their cries. I saw their chains. And I tell you in truth, it is not God's desire for you to end there. His arms are open now. His love is reaching for you even as you hear these words. Cry out to him. Whisper his name. Do not wait until it is too late. Because when I died, I discovered the truth that changes everything. Jesus is alive. He is the Messiah. And he is calling you, just as he called me.